Well, we have level 3 pass rates out now, and we've learned today that the level 3 pass rate was the lowest in history, along with the level 1 pass rate. The level 2 pass rate, I think, was the third lowest, the lowest since 2010. So, there's always a lot of discussion after about, well, what does it mean? What's going on? Why is it this way? What happened? And we have CFAI's explanation of what happened, and we can either accept it or not. And there are a lot of other hypotheses online that I've run into about why this could possibly be going on. Whenever we have a situation like this, where we observe something, and the human need to place meaning on everything, can't be avoided. We want to know why something like this happened. In a more disciplined approach, the first thing that we want to do is reduce the complexity of the question, reduce the complexity of the problem we're looking at, so that we can ask questions that make a lot of sense and eliminate a bunch of dead ends that we don't want to go down. So look what I've done on the screen here. I've got 3 charts up: level 1 since 2006, level 2 since 2006, and level 3 since 2006. And these are the pass rates at level 1. There are more pass rates at level 1. There's more observations at level 1 because it was always twice a year. Level 2 and level 3 was only once a year. But we see some, since 2011, 12, 13, fairly consistent pass rates at all 3 levels. There was some variation back here in all 3 levels. And notice that when we sort of take this, we see that variation wasn't just in level 1, but where there was volatility. That volatility seemed to carry through to all 3 levels. So we see volatility on the right end of the chart here, and that volatility is sort of carrying through to all 3 levels. So I want you to imagine for a second that you're following, let's say, 10 industries or sub-industries in terms of their quarterly earnings, the growth in aggregate earnings that the companies in those particular industries are reporting, and you have a peer group in each industry that you're watching. And let's say that in one quarter, there's 1 or 2 of those industries that you notice deviate significantly from their trend growth in earnings. Well, you would look for micro reasons why. You would go to those particular industries and you would say, it must be something particular to these industries, or this one industry, or these 2 industries. It must be something particular to these. But let's say that you observe all 10 suddenly deviate from their long-term growth in aggregate earnings. Well, then you would not attribute that to the micro level. You would say there must be something at the macro level that affected all industries. So you would look for macro reasons why we observed something like this. Now, again, back here, you do have volatility before you have, and here you have low volatility in all 3. So whatever is going on, look at the pattern that you see in all 3. Whatever is going on is affecting all levels, not just one. So this is not a level 1 story. It's not a level 2 or level 3. It is a consistent story across all 3 levels. So we need to find some macro reason why. We can't just make a story and say, well, here's what's going on with level 1 candidates, because we see it in all 3. And in fact, we see the same. Wherever there's volatility, we see the same volatility in all 3. What is interesting is, if you really look at these exhibits, is the level 1 volatility is higher than level 2, and level 2 volatility is higher than level 3. So whatever is going on is affecting all candidates across all 3 levels, but level 2 candidates have a little bit more experience with dealing with things than level 1, and level 3 has more experience with dealing with things than level 2. So we would expect lower volatility as we go through the levels. this peak right over here, this is the last paper-based exam. So level 1, level 2, and level 3 really didn't have a peak in it. Again, consistent with its lower volatility. That's the last paper-based exam. For level 2, the May exam was canceled, so everybody who wrote in December had already missed one exam. So the rationale at the time, well, there was the reaction and there was the explanation. The explanation from CFAI is candidates were far more prepared. Those who were not prepared probably took the optional deferral into 2021. And those that were more prepared probably elected to write in December if they could. So it was a more prepared batch of candidates that wrote. No, we didn't make the exam easier. But then the reaction from the community is, oh my God, see, they're making the exams easier. They're going to water down the value of the charter. What the hell do I want this for? And then we have the first computer-based test in February, and we saw that the pass rates fell back in line consistently. If we follow this line all the way through, we find, yeah, you're very close to historical pass rates, and that sort of all just went away. It's like, oh, okay, there we go. And then we have this, lowest in history, third lowest in history, lowest in history. And of course, we want to know why, what's going on here. Well, look, this is happening to all three. We have to look at macro factors, not just micro factors, or not even micro factors. It has nothing to do with level 1 or level 2, but it has something to do with the way the exam is being administered. So we have to look at that. So we know we're looking at the macro, and once we get there, and this is the same thing you would do as analysts when you're looking at an industry or all industries or something at the macro level, is you want to separate your known facts from your hypothesized facts. So let's make a list of what we absolutely know for sure. Well, we had to move to computer-based testing. Let's not worry about, well, did that have an impact or not? It's just something we know for sure that happened at the macro level that affected all three, or that was a presence at all three levels. We'll take that. There are fewer questions as well. Fewer questions does mean something, and I'll explain that when we get to possible factors down here. Well, you had a pandemic, you had cancellations, you had multiple cancellations, so that could have led to a couple of things. For the pandemic, I'm going to point to emotional or psychological impacts. For the cancellations, I'll point to cognitive fatigue. Now, is this a population level effect? I would say yeah, at the margin. At the margin, there are going to be some people who were cognitively affected and some people who were emotionally and psychologically affected. Well, that will show up in the numbers. That will be able to explain some variation in the pass rates, at least some of the lower levels. Cognitive fatigue, meaning, listen, for the May exam, you did have some candidates in there that had been twice deferred, so this was their third ramp up. Well, that's kind of hard to do after a while. And there were some candidates online, on Reddit and, under different YouTube videos that had expressed that, that was my story. I just couldn't get into it the third time. I just didn't have it in me. I was sick of seeing the same things again and again. And, I'll attest to that. There are some of the content at the three levels that I do. There are some sections that I pretty much have to fix and maintain every year because there are small changes in them. And I'll tell you, sometimes I'm absolutely sick of it, that I can't even look at that content anymore. I'm sick of it. But you got to do it, right? So, yeah, could that have affected a certain percentage of people? We got to say, yeah, sure. Sure it can. What about emotional and psychological impacts? I'm okay. I don't have any family, so I didn't suffer any emotional loss or any psychological impact from the pandemic. I didn't get it, but I mostly keep to myself. So nothing really much changed for me, but for many people out there, they may have lost significant people in their lives. They may have been affected infected, affected, I guess you could use both words, themselves. So at the margin, will that have an effect on some people as well? Yeah. So, when you put these things together, okay, I think that we could probably attribute some lower performance to this. I think we can. The fewer questions I will tie into what I believe could be a possibility, what is a logical conclusion that can be reached and what makes a lot of sense. What about Prometrics? Anybody out there got a horror story about their experience at Prometrics? I know during the May exam, we heard a lot. Showing up at a test center and there's just a piece of paper on the door saying, sorry, no staff showed up, we're closed, come back another day. Rescheduling, showing up and losing 15 or 20 minutes at the beginning because the center just didn't have their act together. The software not working, the software being buggy. All sorts of different complaints across the spectrum. Well, could that possibly have affected some performance of some candidates at the margin? Again, yeah, I think we can say there might have been a Prometrics effect in there. Maybe that lowered the pass rate 1 or 2%. Maybe the emotional or psychological impacts had another 2 or 3%. Maybe the cognitive fatigue had another 2 or 3%. Well, when you add up these 2 or 3% and the 1% down here, you're somewhere between 5 to 7% lower on the pass rate that you could probably attribute to this and probably not get a lot of pushback on that. So imagine that this were 5 to 7% higher, that this were somewhere in the 45 to 47% range. Well, where would we be? We'd be at historical norms. And let's do the same thing here. Add 5 to 7% on here would be at 47 to 49%. Still below the 56 that it had been for the last 3 years. Still well below the 56, but still less volatility to explain with other things. Well, let's talk about possible factors now. Now that we've gone through the known factors, and we can say, well, okay, I'll give you a little bit here and I'll give you a little bit there. Let's deal with the fewer questions now, because that probably, I think, had an impact of maybe even 5, 6, 7% on its own. When and I'll just explain this by analogy, because it is important. In a regular semester, at the end of the semester, when we not even just at the end of the semester, every exam that we give has to assess the candidate, but it also has to divide the population. So what I mean by that is, I can't make my most difficult question on the exam a question that a B student could answer, because a B student will become an A student. I can't tell the difference between an A student and a B student if the most difficult questions on the exam are questions a B student can answer, because the B student will get them and the A student will get them. Now I can't tell the difference. And when I'm assigning grades as A, B, C, D, I need to separate the population, so I need a range of questions to ask. So there's a certain minimum number of questions I'm going to need on an exam to get that job done. And if you're in some places where there is a plus and a minus associated with the B, a B plus, a B minus, C plus, C minus, well then you have to be able to distinguish between a B plus and a B minus student. It can't just be luck. There has to be some assessment on there that says, look, if you truly are a B plus student, you would have gotten these 2 or 3 questions. If you're only a B minus student, you wouldn't have gotten them, but you would have gotten these. And a B plus student would have got everything the B minus student got, plus the B plus questions, but wouldn't have gotten the A questions. Once I get to fewer questions, that becomes a harder job to do. At fewer questions, I say, okay, well, I could probably still do A, B, C, D, but don't ask me to do B plus and B minus, C plus and B and C minus. I'm not going to be able to get that done. If I can't ask 25 questions on the exam with each of them having 2 or 3 parts, If I got a limit down to 15 questions and suddenly my 3-hour final exam is only 2 hours and 15 minutes, well, then I'm not going to get that job done. I've got to retreat a little bit, and I have to give up some of the separation. So forget about the pluses and minuses. Well, for CFA, it's pass, fail. I only have to divide the population into two. Historically, when you got your results, and we'll look at the results on the next screen. We'll look at just at the overall level results. But when you got your results for the section, you had your two lines. You had your 50%, you had your 70%, and you had your line with a box around it which showed your confidence interval. And you also had this. You had the 10% and the 90%. Well, that's gone now. Those 10 and those 90s are gone. So there was some informational value in your results that allowed you to see where you stood. It did separate you more than just pass-fail. But with fewer questions, that's going to get less, and there's going to be less and less information content in there. I can't separate with that type of granularity at that point. It's going to be harder for me to do. So I got to focus on what I'm doing here, pass-fail. So to get that done, let me just erase some of this space that I've used up. To get that done, let's say that I used to have my hard questions all the way down to my easy questions. So that some candidates got questions down here, other candidates also got these questions as well, and the really good ones started to get the ones up here. I could separate into more than just pass-fail, but I could show you historically what decile you were in, but I could show you your position. I could give you more information than just you failed, you passed, but I could give you something more. If I have fewer questions, I can't get that done. My concern is pass-fail. What I'll do is I'll just chop off these questions. And I have not made the exam more difficult. I haven't raised the difficulty of any of those questions at all. I've just gotten rid of the easy ones. So I can say, no, the exam is no more difficult than it used to be, and that's true. I have not made it more difficult. I've just made it less easy. Now, you may think that means the same thing, but it doesn't. I've just taken off the bottom because I need to separate the population, and I have less time to do it, and I have fewer questions to do it, so I got to get to the point. I can't give you a whole bunch of separations, in which case the questions down here are meaningless. They serve no purpose, they serve no function if they're so far below or significantly below the minimum passing score, such that if you got them right, it is contributing towards your score, but that it does not separate enough between pass and fail. So when I think about fewer questions, I think about, well, probably a tighter range because I don't have as many questions as I need to get a granular separation. Okay, again, that's a hypothesis here. So what does it all mean? We've got all of this. We have what we have here is a big what. We can observe this. This is a what. What happened? We had these scores. We can observe this. We can observe these factors over here. The next question after you have a what is, well, why do we have the what? Well, the first thing we have to answer, and this is what we would do if we were looking at a bunch of industries. The first question we would ask, is this a trend or is this an event? Was there a natural disaster in a particular region that knocked out a whole bunch of suppliers to some common element to these 10 industries? That is an event. That is not a trend. That is an event. If corporate tax rates were raised significantly in a particular country and we observed the earnings of all these companies drop, that is a trend. We would expect that to continue. So the question here is, do we expect this to continue this way, or do we expect this to come back up? Are these events or are these trends? Now, if they're trends, then we can look for why would the Institute make the exam more difficult? We can look for the whys at that point. But trying to find the whys for an event doesn't make a lot of sense because it is an event. And we have enough information up here, we have enough factors to say, okay, if it's an event, there is evidence to support that it's an event because a whole bunch of things happened at the same time. A pandemic happened, cancellations happened, people's loved ones died. People had to get canceled 2-3 times. You had fewer questions to ask. You moved to computer-based testing. You had an unproven supplier of the computer administration. All of these things, well, how do you pull all those apart? Each one of those things could contribute to 1 or 2% in the passing score. So taken collectively at the macro level, we see that it affected all 3 levels. It's got to be something at the macro level. It's plausible that all these things happen at once, and it's very plausible that this is an event. However, I will say, knowing what I know about assessment and knowing what I need to do in a class setting to separate A's from B's, from C's from D's, if you tell me all the exams you give must now be shorter and you have fewer questions, I got some pushback because I say, look, I got a job to get done and you just made it harder. I can't give you the granularity and separation that I used to. I have to go a little bit lighter. I can't give you A+, A-, B+, B-. I got to give you just straight A, B, C, D. And if you say, well, now you got even fewer questions, well then, I don't even know if I can give you A, B, C, D. I'm going to have to go to pass-fail, which a lot of graduate courses have pass-fail. By the way, it's quite common to have pass-fail where 75 or higher is the pass. You either pass or fail. In most PhD seminars, there are no grades. It's pass-fail, and that would be it. You either pass or you don't. And there's just no other way to separate the population, because in a PhD seminar, there's not a lot of assessments. There's typically a paper that's due, and it's one assessment. So you only have one chance to assess that candidate. You're never going to be able to separate an A from a B that way, but you can separate a pass from a fail. So I'm going to hold out on this one, being that there are fewer questions. Probably the range has decreased, so we might see a trend here, and if we do see a trend, it probably has to do with the fewer questions. What I'm going to dismiss very quickly are the conspiracy theories. Oh, it's about money. No, I'm going to dismiss that one right away because there is no share capital in CFA Institute. There's no share-based compensation. There is no one individual that is motivated to build a big pile of money. So I don't see it as being about money. No, I'm going to dismiss that one. Another one I'm going to dismiss is the current charter holders are lobbying and pressuring CFAI to slow down on the number of charter holders that you're creating because you're watering down the value of our charter. I don't know if that's true either, because it would require a significant number of charter holders to either have a reduction in their pay or a dramatic drop in the level of raises that they used to get, because their employers are saying, your charter, they're a dime a dozen now. Don't really need you. It's not worth what you think it's worth. I don't think that's what's going on. And one of the reasons why I don't think that has a lot of validity is because if it did, you would see it in other places as well. You would see the collection of Stanford and Harvard law school graduates petitioning the law school to say, slow down on the number of spaces you're opening up in first year, for God's sake. Stop graduating lawyers. You're watering down the value of our degree. You would see it in a whole bunch of places. You don't see that. That's something you simply don't see. So I don't buy that. And I don't think that anyone at CFAI would bow to any kind of collective voice like that. And if there was a collective voice like that, there would have been an association and a movement and a declaration of something. You would have heard something. So I'm going to dismiss that as well. I think your reasons are pretty much on the screen. And if the trend continues, I'm going to point to this over here, that sure, the exam is not more difficult, but it's less easy. And if it recovers, if we see the, I don't know how long we would have to wait. Here's the thing, right? Because all of these things haven't worked their way through the system yet. So how long would you have to wait? I don't know. Would we really not know if we're returning back to trend until next February, next May, next August? I don't know. But at this point, we have an event. It is not a trend yet. It's an event. An event doesn't need a why. It doesn't need a big hypothesis of a why. It just needs an acknowledgement of the factors that could have caused the event, and then we determine whether that event is going to be a trend or just an event. And again, let's go back to the industries. A major natural disaster, that's an event. A raising of the tax rates at the corporate level, that's a trend. I don't know what we have here, trend or event. Anyways, that I think that is the best that I can do to sort of bring the complexity down to some things that we can point to and say, well, look, if we can get 1% out of this and 2% out of that and 1% out of that, it's not unrealistic to think that. We can slowly start to say, well, level 2 doesn't seem to be a problem at that point. Level 3, less of a problem, and level 1 seems to be a big problem, but we could, point to that explanation. Not gonna know until we have more data. What we have here is cross-sectional data. What we're going to need is time series data on each one. Super quiz going on. Back to level 1 quant. What type of data did I just describe? Panel data. Exactly. So that's what we're going to need. Anyways, let's go to screen 2 here. All right, I've tried to draw out on the screen as closely as possible what your overall score would have looked like and what you would have been presented with. And these are for candidates that did not make it. You have this black line here representing your score, and the box around it is a confidence interval, saying, listen, we get, that we don't ask you a lot of questions for every section. We have to pick and choose, but based on the statistical nature of what we do, if you had taken another exam similar to this at any other time, you probably would have been in this range somewhere, and that is your confidence interval range. And your confidence interval will either include the MPS, or will not include the MPS. So over here, what this box is saying is that the Institute is 95% confident that no matter what exam you would have written, you wouldn't have made it. Whereas down here, they're saying, we can't be 95% certain that you wouldn't pass if we give you a different version of the exam, because the minimum passing score is within the confidence interval. And what do we know about hypothesis testing? We know that if the hypothesized value is within the confidence interval, then statistically speaking, there is no difference between the score and the minimum passing score. And this is basically what it's saying. Still, statistically speaking, doesn't cut it. Objectively speaking, it's still a do not pass. So what do we do with these two things? Well, this will dictate the strategy that you're going to use in going forward and what your goal is. So let's start with your confidence interval does not contain the minimum passing score. That is a clear statistical do not pass. You got to aim for a 15 to 20% improvement per section. This is not your goal, by the way. That is not your goal. That is the minimum passing score. I don't ever want to be called the minimum. I don't ever want to be called average. Ever. I don't know about you, but to me, somebody said, well, what do you think of his ability? And somebody said, average. I can't think of a bigger insult to me than to be called average. I've always been, I've always had a need for high levels of achievement. It's just innate in me. This is not your goal. This is your goal. Anywhere up here, the higher the better. That's your goal. So the minimum passing score is just the minimum. So if we're going to redo this, add 15 to 20% per section, You're not going to have a strategy that just gets you across the finish line, because you leave no room for variability. You leave no room for probability. You want to have the lower part of this bound up here. You don't want to just get your score at the minimum passing score. You want to get the lower bound above the minimum passing score. You're going to have 15 to 20% per section. That's your goal. So you're revisiting the readings. You're not just reviewing them. You're not going to say, well, look, I've already been through the content once. I guess I'll just review and hit the Q banks. Q banks are not learning, are not really learning tools. Most Q banks are assessment tools. It takes a very particular writer and a pretty skilled writer to write question banks that are pedagogically learning tools. Most of them are written as assessment tools. Well, it's like getting on a scale again and again and again to test whether or not you've lost any weight. Without any intervention in there, you're not going to lose weight. You're just weighing yourself, right? Look, I don't think this is a surprise, right? It's going to require a commitment of time. I get a lot of people asking me over the years, and even in university, is do I need to do this? Do I need to do that? Can I just do this? Can I just watch this? Can I just do that? Trying to figure out how little they have to do to get by. Or is there a better way to learn this? Is there an easier way to get this done? Is there a faster way to get this done? If there was, you would have been introduced to this in university a long time ago. There is no secret to learning. There is no secret. It is about putting in the time. That's it. There is no matrix where you lay in a chair and something gets plugged into the back of your neck and within 3 or 4 minutes you know Kung Fu. Not going to happen. You got to put in the time. So it's going to require a commitment of time, which requires discipline and a plan. We'll look at some strategies on the next screen that I think will work. If you're down here, you're 5 to 10% per section is what you're looking to get. You're going to review your high scoring sections to keep them current, and you're going to revisit your low scoring sections. Strategy of picking up from the bottom. Now, for level 1, I'll do level 1, level 2, level 3 here. If you're at level 1 and you're over here, you have to sort of ask yourself, is this something you really want to do? Is this something you care about? And if it is, well, you're going to have to prioritize. At level 2, same thing. Did you just squeak past level 1 and now that's showing up at level 2? Are you underperforming at level 2 because you didn't build a good solid foundation at level 1? Or, at level 2, are you kind of losing interest in this? Is it sort of fading away and you're thinking that you need to do it because you've gotten this far? Sometimes you really need to reevaluate why you're doing something. If you're level 3, well, you don't quit. You're level 3. You've gotten this far, which means you can do it. There's just something particular about this level. And it does require you to think differently. Level 1 is very factually based. You probably could memorize your way through level 1. Level 2, if you really know your formulas and you remember enough stuff, you probably could get through there. You're not going to memorize your way through level 3 because level 3 requires a lot of judgment and a lot of trade-offs. So you could look at a question and there are 3 or 4 possibilities that you could take. And you have to determine the best course of action to take, but all the courses of action have some merit. But one of them will have more merit than the others, and some of them can be disqualified because of some reasons. Well, now you're into the justification era. Well, that's more than just, you're not going to memorize your way through something like that. So level 3 is a little bit different. So maybe you're trying to learn level 3 the same way you learned level 1 and level 2. Without thinking that, hang on now, level 3 is more ambiguous. If interest rates go up, what should I do? Well, it's not always just one thing. It's not always clear. You could do this, or you could do that, or you could do this other thing. What are your goals? What are your objectives? You have to weigh them against what you want to get done, and there might be 2 or 3 strategies that you can follow, and one of them just edges out over the other. You have to be able to do that. So if you're level 3, you're certainly going to keep going. If you're level 1 or level 2, well then yeah, at that point I think you can ask yourself, especially if you've been through this multiple times. You've done level 3, or sorry, you're at level 1, it's your 3rd time not passing. Maybe consider, what it is that you're doing. And maybe ask yourself, why am I not doing well on this? And if the passion isn't there, if you're looking at this and you're bored most of the time, this is not for you. That's okay. It's not for you. You're not going to have a fun career in something that you just are not interested in. All right, let's head over and look at some strategies here. All right, let's look at some study strategies. Now, probably the best one out there are groups. However, there are good groups and there are bad groups. If you're going to use a study group, make sure you form a study group that is good. It's not just a matter of 4 people coming together and meeting every week and talking about what they what they need to know, what questions they have, what they understand, what they don't understand. It's not. It's just not very effective. There is some thinking involved in forming a group. The first one is diversity of ability. And by the way, when we use this word diversity, it should always mean diversity of ability, or diversity of opinion, or diversity of idea or ideology. This idea of diversifying based on identity, I don't agree with that. I mean, what if you had a great diverse board of directors and you had every identity represented, but they all thought the same way? They all shared the same opinion. You don't have diversity anymore. You have groupthink. That's all you have. You have a dysfunctional board because they all think the same thing. Diversity of ability. You want a mixture of people with strong topics. Maybe I'm really good at fixed income and derivatives, but I'm not that good at individual portfolio management. But you're really good at individual portfolio management, but you're not that good at derivatives and fixed income. Do you see where I'm going with this? Also, get some work experience in there. Get some people who have work experience. They're at level 3 especially. You have people who have been, on a bond trading desk for 3 or 4 years. You have portfolio managers that have been doing it for 4, 5, 6 years. Derivatives traders out there. Get a bunch of them on your team. And you're going to have regular meetings. You got to have discipline here. Regular meetings, and prepare for these meetings. Don't free ride. There's nothing more insulting than somebody who shows up for a group meeting who's done absolutely nothing but is just there to extract value from everyone else but adds nothing. Don't do that. Don't be that person. Ask questions. That's how we learn. Ask questions. Answer other people's questions in that meeting, and record your online session so that you don't forget and you don't have to keep emailing other people saying, how did you explain this and what did you say there? You want to be a positive influence on the group, not a drain on their time. You want to reduce the amount of time they have to spend in trying to figure things out on their own. And when you do that, you reduce the amount of time that you spend having to figure things out on your own. But if you're going to form a group, think about the group that you want. What are you strong in? Great. Don't look for other people who are strong in what you're strong in. And listen, and I say this, I've said this in university classes before, when you're forming a group. Your friends are not necessarily good group members. All right? So 4 guys living in a house together being in the same group to do a group presentation usually doesn't work well at all. So take some time, build a group, but it's powerful once you have it, especially when you have that diversity of ability, and especially when you have the diversity of background and work experience. Because that person with work experience can tell a story. And we learn so well when we can learn by narrative. If somebody can come in and give an example of where this happened, or what happened, or apply this in the real world and give you a story behind it. Somebody with work experience has that narrative ability. So build good, strong groups. Use groups. You can't be good at everything. It's very rare that you see a candidate who just scores tops across all sections. Yes, it does happen, but it's very rare. Usually there's one or two sections that are lower than the others. There's one or two weak sections, and we're all different. We're all strong and weak in different areas. Number 2, use a top-down approach. And there are 2 video links in the description box where I show a top-down approach. One, I use level 1 hypotheses testing to show you how powerful that can be in structuring the reading and structuring it in your brain, what you're about to learn. And another one, I use currency exchange rates at level 1. Both considered challenging topics, and both have, that candidates read them feel that they're overwhelming with the amount of information. Like, how do I keep it all straight? Well, I show you how to do it using a top-down approach, starting with chapter structure, heading to section structure, and then to the subsection. And you dive as deep as you need to dive until you get it. But you start at the top level as opposed to all of the detail at the bottom, because sometimes it's hard to keep straight. But there are 2 video links that I show you how that's done. That's a powerful way to structure the knowledge in a reading in a way that you can then begin to understand it. And distributed learning. We hit a certain topic and we stay with a certain topic until it's done, then we move on to the next topic and the next topic. Distributed learning means you're going to do 2 or 3 different topics concurrently. And this is a semester model at any university that you went to. Depending on the university you were at and depending on the program you were in, you had anywhere from 3 to 6 classes per semester. Engineering, for some reason, wants to load you up with 6 classes a semester. That's brutal. Most of the time, you're 5 classes. Some universities are more intensive in the semesters, in the depth that you're going to go into in each class. So it's 3 per semester. Typically, graduate programs will have 3 per semester. But it's distributed learning. Because it's not just one topic and you're done, then move on, then one topic, then you're done, and move on. Even executive MBAs, which are done, in 10-week segments, you usually have 2 classes in that 10-week segment, and then you move on to the next 2 classes. It's never just one class. So try 2 to 3 different topics concurrently. Try a top-down approach and build a group. If you're struggling, nothing wrong with a group. And listen, even within a group, when I say diversity of ability, even having somebody with very low ability in all topics is beneficial, because that person will then ask you questions where you then have the opportunity to narrate that answer. You'll never learn more than when you're teaching someone else. Just don't be the smartest person in your study group. Please, be the smartest person in a particular section, but if you're the smartest person in your study group, you're getting nothing out of it. It is of no value to you. Oh, it's of great value to everyone else. If you want to be philanthropic with your time like that, yeah, go ahead. But you'll extract nothing out of it. You want your group members to be smarter than you in different ways. That's the way to build a group. Diversity of ability. Anyways, I hope that helps. I hope these other 2 videos help. And let's just end on this. If these low pass rates are a trend, that means the bar has been raised on everyone. But that doesn't mean that you should walk away or that you should quit or you say, oh, this is just not worth it. You just need to raise your game. You can have anything in the world that you want. Anything you can conceive of, you can have it. But there is a reason why every single religion has the sacrifice story. What are you willing to sacrifice to God? You have to make a sacrifice. You ask God for something, you gotta sacrifice something. Whether it be a cow, a sheep, or even your son in the Abrahamic tradition, or at least attempted sacrifice there is a sacrifice. Well, that's an analogy for exactly what you do in your life. You can have whatever you ask for. What are you willing to sacrifice to get it done? If this is something you want, what are you willing to sacrifice? And we'll leave it there.